What's up guys, today I'm about to share with you how to counter the fried liver attack in a new and very efficient way so that you can achieve winning position in only 9 moves. Now, recently I recorded a video showing you how Carlsen played this position as black against Gukesh. He played d5 first and then continued with this mysterious move pawn to b5. They ultimately created total Magnus and drew the game. So here's the interesting part about this. Most grandmasters, myself included, usually consider the move b5 to be interesting, aggressive, but not very solid, and only suitable against an unprepared opponent. However, Magnus possesses one of the most annoying qualities of a human. He tends to be always right. Therefore, once he played that, I decided to dig deeper into this and really check whether it's a good variation for you to play. Now, spoiler, if your opponents typically are below Gukesh, it's probably going to work. So here's an interesting part about this. After you play b5, your opponents in most cases are going to capture this pawn. Of course, they may do something else as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the vast majority of them are going to capture this pawn. Looks really good. They grab a pawn, they attack your knight. Now you've got a great opportunity to hit not even 2 but 3 birds with one pawn. You grab this pawn and now you guard your knight. You hit this bishop on b5 and you also attack this pawn on g2. Therefore, it feels like the easiest solution for them to trade off the bishop first. Right now, they still need to guard this pawn and then to castle. That's what the majority of your opponents are going to do. Now, you play bishop b7, creating this battery, and at first, it looks like a very primitive threat. Like you just threaten checkmate in one move, and it seems like there are a number of options for your opponent to counter that. And although it's true, here is some really impressive stats about this position. 84% of your opponents are going to play the wrong move, which is going to lead them to a quick disaster. Because there's only one move that can possibly save them. And it's a very counterintuitive move. It's not to block the diagonal. It's the move queen to f3, opposing their own queen, against your bishop. And typically for humans, it doesn't feel right. Moreover, even if one of your opponents are going to play this move queen f3, which is going to happen seldom, it doesn't give them any advantage. It's just a balanced, interesting game after that. You play e4 and the game goes on. But most of your opponents are going to defend differently and are going to go down very quickly. For example, if they decide to bring their knight back to play and to close this diagonal, they may play knight to f3. At this point, it looks like white is still up a pawn. They're kind of attacking this pawn. Not really, because the knight can't go away, but nevertheless, feels like they're doing good. But you can be absolutely brutal and just insist on this checkmating idea. Because all we need to do is to drive away this knight. And you can do that by going g5. You play very paradoxical chess. You sacrifice the pawn with the reckless b5. Now you're hitting g5. What the heck are you doing here? But strangely enough, this simple plan to go g4, kick away this knight, and deliver a checkmate on g2 is very effective. It's not easy for white to deal with it. If they try to block the pawn by playing h3 so that they control this square, in a way that only helps you, because you can now play rook g8, and once you push g4 on the next move, that will also include your rook into the attack. You may be wondering, hey, but how about white trying to play rook e1 or maybe queen e2 and attack my king and my pawn along the e-file? We don't care, we just castle queenside. And your king is actually surprisingly safe here, because your bishop kind of looks like a stepbrother to these pawns, and it feels more or less like standard castling. If your opponent ever moves his knight, for example, grabs this pawn on e5, we highly welcome that, because that's checkmate in 1 after queen takes g2, therefore it's not a good option for him. If instead they try to grab it with the rook, then we just adhere to our plan. We go pawn g4 to break open the g-file, and once white captures, you've got a really pleasant choice. You can capture it with either a knight or a rook, and you win in both cases. If you capture it with a rook, now this pressure becomes unbearable for white. For example, if they play whatever, let's say knight c3, you can even play queen takes f3, because this pawn is actually pinned, it can't move. Therefore, after this trade, now you'll be up a piece, you grab this knight, which used to be on f3, and you keep attacking them, so that is totally winning. An equally good alternative is to recapture with a knight. In this case, you gain a tempo hitting the rook, and you also include one more piece into the attack, as if you needed any more of them. Now, after the rook comes back, literally any decent move would win the game for you here. You just have so much pressure. Literally all of your pieces are so active. If you wish to, you may also bring the other one right here, and there's just nothing white can do. Notice that this knight can't ever move. Like, if you want to be fancy, you can even sack your queen right here. That's also pretty cool, because that opens up the king. And after that, you play knight e3, discover, check. This also takes away this f1 square, therefore the king cannot go to. It has to move to the h-file, to h1 or h2, doesn't matter. And now you come up with this very straightforward checkmate, which they can defend against. After whatever move that they play, it's rook h6, checkmate. What else can your opponents play to counter this checkmating threat? Well, the most played move is the move pawn f3, as it looks very solid. They try to barricade this long diagonal, making your bishop inactive. However, our plan remains to be exactly the same. You still play h6, kicking this knight out. Where can it go? Can go here, because then we simply take it. And after this, we recapture with the queen, keep threatening checkmate. So they gotta go there. And then you still play g5. And fundamentally, it's all the same thing. Wanna go g4, break open this diagonal, and deliver checkmate either straight away, if they're careless, or we're gonna bring our rook to the g file and add more firepower to our attack and finish it that way. If they ever play queen e2 or rook e1, threatening this pawn and your king, you know what to do. You just castle queenside. You were going to do this anyway, plus you include your rook into the attack, which is also nice. After whatever they do, d3 or any other move, you can go g4. Our plan is to open this diagonal. They capture it. In this game, I'll show you one game, but you don't have to memorize it. It's just the overall attacking plan that you need to remember, right? So they played bishop c5 check, which is also pretty cool, including the bishop into the attack. Now, white can't cover with a knight or with a bishop, because in this case, that would allow you this queen g2 checkmate straight away. Therefore, they need to move the king away, and black play rook g8, bringing the rook to the open file. Now we're going to grab this pawn on g4 and deliver mate. White played knight c3, then rook takes g4. Now we're already threatening. Queen takes g2. We've got 3 attackers. White tried knight e4 to barricade the diagonal, and although black could just capture it, but in reality his position is that strong that he doesn't even have to worry. Well, he does have to worry, right? If he captures, he needs to calculate queen takes g4 check. So he just played rook g8, which is much more powerful. You totally ignore anything that your opponent does, and you just brutally force your plan. Now we're stacking rooks along the g-file, adding even more pressure. Moreover, we're ready to sacrifice material because we're going for the checkmate. So I capture this knight, and black sacrifice the queen just to open up the diagonal. And after knight takes, here comes rook takes g2. Finally, we got to the king. And now it's game over for white. They can't capture it with a queen because then bishop takes and it's mate. And if they do anything else, for example, they're really greedy, they grab this rook on g8, there comes this double check and checkmate. Now we know that your opponents actually cannot capture this cheeky pawn on b5, even though most of them will. Now, what else can they try? They can also capture this knight on c6. In this case, you recapture and your position becomes pretty good because, first of all, you solve the problem of a defense without ever defending, just by being bold and counterattacking. Also, this knight on g5 is currently misplaced. It's doing nothing. The pawn on c4 is actually doing a good job preventing their development, because if they ever play d3, you can always capture it and create weaknesses in their position. Therefore, all in all, you can already say that it worked out for you. There is also one more thing which I love a lot about this variation, is that it's a rare situation where their castling is a bad mistake. Now, all classical tutorials tell you castle early, castle within 10 moves, and they do it and it's a losing error. Why? Because then you have this idea to play h6, kicking this knight out, can go here, therefore this is the only square, you go e4, and now they realize that there's a problem. The knight can go here, therefore they try to go here. And here you play another tricky move, bishop d6. Common Igor Nation stuff, good things come to those who bait. We want them to capture this pawn on c4, and the vast majority of them will, but frankly, there's also not that much of a choice for them of what to do. If they try to support the knight by going d4, you have a rare choice of which en passant capture you prefer. Either way, it does not really defend the knight, you can just grab it and the knight is still hanging while they lost the pawn. So if we take it back, the majority of your opponents will certainly grab this pawn, hit your bishop and think that life is cool, all the way until you play bishop takes h2 and they realize that they messed up. Now the king needs to go, and after knight to g4 check, this is a usual combo which is worth remembering. It actually works in different openings. The king needs to move, our knight is guarded, therefore he can't capture it with his queen. The king needs to move, then you throw the queen out, threatening this checkmate, and there is a forcing sequence. If they try to run away with rook e1, that drops this pawn on f2, so you can first capture this one with check, and after this you keep checking the king all the way till it's a checkmate. Going over all these tricks and traps, I've just realized that your opponents are gonna regret not watching this video. Anyway, let's continue. So if they capture this knight, and we recapture their bishop. Now we know that in fact they need to be careful because we're planning to go h6 and this knight is in trouble. Therefore queen e2 is the right move for them, not only attacking this pawn but also preparing the move knight e4 if required. To this you have once again that multi-purpose move queen d5, solidifying right about everything, plus you hit this pawn on c6, plus you hit this pawn on g2. So the queen is really doing her best. Now, they gotta cover this pawn, if not you're gonna capture it and destroy their position, therefore they castle. Now you can play bishop d6, just also solidifying everything, getting ready to castle so that your position is rock solid. If they attack your queen, that's not a problem because it's not a waste of time for you, you grab this pawn. And in this game they played pawn d4. Now you don't have to memorize the following variation. Again, I just want to show you those common attacking patterns, attacking plans that you can utilize yourself. It was probably the easiest for black just to capture en passant, but they played bishop b7, which is also an interesting idea, threatening that checkmate, which is one of the key ideas of this whole variation. White played f3, and now black can't take this because the pawn is pinned, therefore they just castled. White happily grabbed the pawn on e5, maybe thinking that it's a double attack, but there is this check so that the bishop can run away, and after king h1 they played rook e8, turning the pin around. Now it's the white pawn that is pinned. Therefore white captured this pawn, black recapture right here, and the common situation for these variations is that although right now white is up a pawn, because, you know, they have this pawn on the b file, which you recklessly sacrificed early in the game with b5. However, you put pressure on them, and it's very unpleasant for white. It's hard to find proper moves. Now, this knight is a bit loose. The queen on c4 is also somewhat in danger. Maybe you want to play bishop a6 with this skewer. It feels dangerous for white. Anyway, they played bishop f4. Now, after rook f5, still these pieces are a little bit hanging. He tried to cement the position with g3, but that actually turned out to be a bad mistake. Can you find the winning shot for black here? I'll give you a couple seconds to think about this. By the way, while you're thinking, if you wish to know how to find attacking moves properly, I've got a free masterclass that you can access by clicking the link below the video in the description, where I go over all these ideas, how to find proper moves easily yourself, how to calculate them, and I'm showing you how I do this so that you can replicate my thinking process. Now, I gave you some time, so I hope that you could find it. It's rook takes g5, sacrificing the rook, eliminating a defender of this pawn, because on the next move you follow with this beautiful queen sack, leading to these two bishops checkmate, and it's really cool. As the video progresses, the pawn got a raise, and now it's a brilliant pawn. So, what can your opponent do in case we are countering a really well-prepared opponent? Well, they're going to play this move bishop f1, just like Gukesh did against Carlsen. Initially it looks like Dumb and Dumber chess. Black sacrifices a pawn, white does not capture anything, instead retreats back to the starting position, but in reality it's a great move by white. And that's why this variation b5 in the past used to be considered a bit suspicious, because we're hoping for them to capture this pawn, but if they're careful, if they know the right way, bishop f1, then you're in trouble. At least it was considered to be that way for a very long time. So why should white move the bishop to that awkward starting position back to f1? Well, the thing is, if they move the bishop to any other square, let's say to b3 or to e2, the issue is, from those both squares you can chase the bishop with your knight. So either this way, or if they go back to e2, this way. And that gives you this great tempo to not only, remove your knight from a danger, but also to take away their light squared bishop. If, let's say they play c3 right here, you can just trade off, and then you play queen takes d5, and we basically get everything that we have in the main line. Now you didn't even need to sacrifice a pawn, the material is equal, plus you're now still hitting this pawn, so you'll have still same attack with bishop, you can still castle queenside, this knight on g5 is still misplaced, you get everything same to the main line, even better. Now they don't have an extra pawn, they can't play knight c3 and hit your queen, so it's just a superior version of the main line. With that being said, needless to say that bishop f1 is a computer recommendation, therefore if your opponent actually plays that, feel free to call Kramnik. In this position, black is really at the crossroad, and it's not easy to find the right move. Because if you capture this pawn with a queen, now knight c3 is really strong with this double attack, and you don't have this move queen takes g2 anymore, because the bishop actually guards the pawn, so let's take that back. If instead you play knight to d4, here it's also not as effective. Yes, you defend this pawn, but now they have this move pawn c3, and you can't trade the knight off because there is no white bishop on either e2 or b3. So that move also is not an easy solution. Therefore, Carlsen played knight takes d5, and that move captures back the pawn plus opens up this attack. However, White doesn't back down, they play bishop takes b5. This time the bishop comes back, hits this knight, possibly your king and rook, therefore you need to defend it. But the idea here is that it turned out that after bishop b7, a very important move, we don't want to just defend, we want to play this bishop to this active diagonal, because in the future it's going to help us to attack. And it turned out that in this position, black has sufficient compensation for that sacrificed pawn. That's what Carlsen used in his game against Gukesh. For example, in this game, white decided to play pawn d3. It's not Gukesh's game against Carlsen, I analyzed it earlier. This time it's another game, just showing you those common plans of both sides. White needs to do something about this knight. In this game, they played d3 to guard the knight this way. Black played bishop e7 to add one more attack. Therefore, the knight went back and black castled. So although black is down a pawn, their plan, generally speaking, is to play knight to d4 to open up this diagonal and have that long-lasting compensation, trying to create threats to your opponent's king. In this game, however, white decided, wait a second, I can just trade off this defender and then play knight takes c5, win the second pawn, plus hit the bishop, which looks really cool for white, almost winning. Is that correct? And black said no, because they're ahead in development and they played bishop b4. They don't guard this bishop, they instead go for the counterattack. And after c3, they played rook e8, and this time, this knight needs protection. White played pawn d4, and now black played bishop d6, not even the best move, but nevertheless, after white castled and black traded everything on e5, we got this typical position, white is up a pawn, but black has this very strong bishop and chances to attack on the king side. White needs to develop this knight, so they played knight d2, and black went for this attack straight away with knight f4, hitting this pawn twice, and after f3, black went for a pretty cool maneuver. Knight e2 check, and after the king moves, there is queen h4. Now, there were other ways for black to continue their attack as well, but this is one of those nice ideas. This time we threaten knight to g3, because the pawn on h2 is pinned. Let's say if white plays whatever, just to show you an idea. Knight g3, the pawn is pinned, therefore we have this double attack. White noticed that, decided to cover that by going knight e4 to cover the square. However, black came up with another idea. Can you find it? I'll give you a few seconds. It's queen h2, sacrificing the queen yet again, leading to this. I think it's Anastasia's checkmate pattern, if I'm not mistaken. If you missed my previous video where I analyzed the game of Gukesh against Carlsen in the same variation, check it out right here. It was really wild and interesting. And if you want to level up your chess overall and learn to find those attacking moves and calculate them on their own, head to my free masterclass right there, and I'll wait for you on the inside.